We don't need questions.
We do not need questions.
We don't need those
I got
stinking questions.
questions
Oh, yeah. And so, what, so start off with a personal history?
Right.
Okay, back in 1530,
So you were born?
there were 3 girls in Earl's Colne, England, that were put in the pillories for fooling around with the town boys. Back then, they usually didn't use pillories for women, but apparently these girls qualified. And one of them is my progenitor. We're not sure which one. We don't have any record of the parents, and so my history stops at 1530. Anything else you want to know?
Yes. Tell me the part you do know.
And then we came across, oh, and Earl's Colne is upstream of Stratford-on-Avon. And so I say we were pooping in Shakespeare's water. That's why he was such a good writer of literature, because he was slightly brain damaged from my family. So. But we came across on both, that's mom's side of the history. They were Brunson, Bronson, Brownsons, because we couldn't spell back then. And so we really don't know everybody we're related to. But on both sides of the family, we predate the Revolutionary War. My 5 great-grandfather camped out with George and all of his friends in a place called Valley Forge in 1776. He died spring of 1777. His son survived Valley Forge and his father's death, therefore my family exists. That's mom's side also. I don't have dad's side that far back in the States, but we do predate the Revolutionary War. He was down south. I don't have any record of family in the Revolutionary War. Dad's side was Quakers. I don't know if they were Quaker by choice. I think they were, because I come from a long and rich history of peace awareness. Or were they just draft dodgers? I don't know. But they were Quakers. In 1833, we joined the church back east before it moved to Kirtland and Nauvoo and Independence and everywhere else. And so we've been in this church for a long, long time. I'm 5th generation. Some people are 6th and 7th generation, but the Easters take a little longer to get started on families, I think. But we joined the church in 1833. I have a 3 great uncle who was a captain in the Nauvoo militia, who was the captain of the party that brought Emma back across the frozen Mississippi, if you remember that story, with the inspired version sewed into her petticoats. And so, and this is me, not the family story. I take credit for the inspired version, because Emma was just the mule. She was just the carrier. It was my uncle that brought her back from Independence back to Nauvoo. And of course, that's a bit of hyperbole. But there is mention in church history of I think it was Heilbronson, I'm not sure. And then we make it down to my family. Oh, Grandma, on mom's side, there's a diary that I have at the house if you would like to read it. Her mother kept a journal of their journey from around Galena, Illinois, around the turn of the century, this century, across the bottom of Iowa, basically Highway 2, and they turned left at about Pleasanton. They missed Lamoni. And they kept on going. Like I say, this was 1900, 1905 or something like that. My grandmother was born in 07. And they went down to El Dorado Springs, because you have to pronounce it with a Missouri accent. They lived in El Dorado Springs area down there in the Ozarks. And the first year they were, oh, hi. The first year they were there, they had to plow their field with a milk cow, because the neighbors shot the oxen, shot the horse. They didn't have milk cow when they came across the southern part of Iowa. They had a couple of goats, and they said they could have sold the goats 50 times over because of the goat milk. But she was saving the goat milk that she had because she was pregnant with my grandmother and the other kids that were there. I think she has 2 or 3 older brothers, Uncle A and Uncle Emil. I don't know. And they were down in El Dorado Springs. And then they came back to Independence, don't know when. She met my grandfather, Fritz Christian Osier, who immigrated from Germany, Chemnitz, Germany, and they were married before my mother was born in 1928, and so I'm not sure when they were married. And they grew up down in Independence, Missouri. It's right near Fair. They're on Fair, 909 East Fair. They're right next to 23rd and Nolan Street. And he had a brick house. He had the first air-conditioned home in the Kansas City area because he worked for Independent Stove and Foundry. And so the furnace in the basement of the house was enormous. I mean, it was, I don't think it went from here to the wall, but maybe almost. Took up a big section of the furnace, and he had grates that he made and installed into the furnace, and they would slide in 50-pound blocks of ice and they would cool the house. So he had the first air-conditioned home in Independence in Kansas City. It helps to have friends that work for foundries. But that's where my mother was born and grew up. And then she met Dad. She knew of Dad, who grew up down on Scott Street in Independence prior to their going to Graceland, but they just knew of each other, Zion's League and whatnot. Dad was dating a lady by the name of Jean Firkins, and after Mom died at age 74, don't get breast cancer, it's bad for your health, he hooked up with Jean Firkins.
Really?
And I had the privilege of marrying them, so I get to say I married my father. But apparently, back when they were in high school, those Baptist girls were okay to date. But if you're from Independence, not necessarily the marrying kind. And so that relationship did not persist. He came to Graceland after the war. He was in the Navy for 9 months. And he tells the story when the Germans found out he signed up for the Navy, that's when they quit. Had nothing to do with his older brother following Patton up through Europe into Germany, Berlin. Didn't have anything to do with that. But when he joined the Navy, the Germans quit, and then when they found out that he was going to be the top man in submarines, that's when the Japanese quit. Had nothing to do with bomb or anything like that, because he was interested. My father's career was electrical engineering, electronics, ever since the word go. And apparently, if you signed up for the Navy in World War II, if you signed up for the subcorps, only 50% of which came back from the war, you got to pick your own job. And so he picked subcorps because he wanted to be sonar radar. And I don't know this, I've been in a World War II submarine. Dad was 5'10", and he had to duck to get around. All the plumbing and everything, I was banging my head down in Galveston, Texas, on the subs down there. That's when, was it Benji sat on a fire ant nest?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah. Stepped into it.
Stepped into it, yeah. We learn a lot of things in our family. So.
Yeah.
But he signed up for the subcorps because apparently the radar guy is up in the conning tower near the antennas and whatnot. That makes him the top person in submarines, which means he's the first one that they aim for when the hatch opens. But he was the top man in submarines. Of course, he got in at the very end of World War II, so he didn't see any action. 3 of his brothers did. One followed Patton up through Europe, support for the tank corps. One went through Tarawa in the Army and never came back the same man. Uncle John was a broken man when he came back. My total memories of Uncle John, I have to move this, he lived 2 doors down from Grandma Easter, was sitting in a chair with his feet up on a hassock, quilt over his feet. And you can go visit Uncle John and Hazel, but you shut up and you be quiet and you act like polite little kids. You don't ram around that house. If you want to ram around the house, you go back to Grandma Easter's house, 2 doors down, and there you can ram around, but you don't ram around at Uncle John's house. So he came back broken man. And then Uncle Charles never got his feet dry, but he was shuffling people on and off of Iwo Jima. So 3 of Dad's brothers saw significant action in World War II. Dad missed out, got his BSEE at KU after 2 years at Graceland, where he met, fell in love, and married my mother.
BESE, I don't know.
Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering.
Is everybody cold or warm in here right now? Cold?
Cold?
Are you cold?
No, look, this guy's ruddy on the.
Dale,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have a comment about being cold.
We have to adjust the color balance, yeah.
Well, you were sunburned.
Yeah, he's ruddy too. But he has BSEE from KU. It was a 48, I think. My eldest sister was born in 49 in Lawrence, Kansas. And then RCA hired him out of school, and his career was RCA the whole time. He was one of those people that got a job and stuck with it. So I was born in 1954 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, because RCA hired Dad out to New Jersey. Our house was in New Jersey, but the closest hospital was in Philadelphia. And so Mom says I was born at Our Lady of Perpetual Guilt over in Philadelphia. I think it was either Episcopalian Hospital or Presbyterian Hospital. I cannot remember which. I was kind of small at the time. I was born over there, lived in Pennsylvania for about 5 or 7 days. And then the first 5 years of my life was in Pennsauken, you have to say it correctly, Pennsauken, New Jersey. And then in 59, RCA transferred Dad. Oh, before 59, and I have very few memories of this, we spent 6 months in El Paso, Texas. They shipped Dad down to El Paso, Texas, and so pregnant mom with 4 kids and a bun in the oven lived in a motel in El Paso, Texas for 6 months. And I don't have many memories of that because I was a 3-year-old kid at the time. But I asked Dad later on, well, what were you doing in El Paso, Texas? Oh, I was up at the White Sands Proving Grounds. Well, what are you doing up there? We were working on radar-fused missiles. I thought we were a peace church, you know. So what's the deal with radar-fused missiles? Well, if you get the bomb to explode 30 feet above the ground, then it explodes better. Boom, and you kill more people. Dad,
Great, wonderful.
shorten the war, is how he explained it to me. That's apparently how he justified that in his own head. But he was working on the first radar-fused bombs and missiles back in 58 or so. And then in 59, RCA transferred him from, I think it was a Haddonfield plant in New Jersey, out to Van Nuys. And so we moved out to California in 59. RCA was gonna, move us all. I remember Mayflower Moving Truck is the one that moved all our stuff. But Dad negotiated with RCA, said, how about if you just give me 4 weeks vacation, buy me a trailer, and we'll just camp across country. Okay. And so we got the Nimrod, we got a pop-up tent camper, and we camped for 4 solid weeks across the country with 6 of us. My cousin Donna Ray was with us at the time. And so Mom had a 3-burner Coleman stove, which I think we still have in our garage. And we camped with 6 kids in a Chevy wagon in a pop-up tent trailer that Dad wired a 12-volt battery to, so we had 1 light in it. No plumbing, no heat, no water, no nothing. There was a chamber pot between the 2 beds, and the bad kid got the privilege of emptying the chamber pot every morning.
What were the ages of the children?
Oh, 59, that would be 3 to Donna Ray was in high school at the time. So, and I don't know how we all fit in the car. There were 3 of us on 1 slide-out bed, Mom and Dad and Diane, the little one, on the other slide-out bed, somebody on the floor between the 2 beds, and then, how's that, 3, 4, 5, with the chamber pot, yes. Head toward the chamber pot because they didn't want to kick it. And the 6th kid was in the car. is how we made it across country. So we traveled across country for 4 solid weeks. If you want, I have, I believe, 28 rolls of slides that Dad took on the trip over. We can do this at another time,
Yes.
that I have upstairs.
A weekend.
And so we saw a large part of the country, and I have appreciation for geography and travel. Here in the U.S., I'm a bit of a bigot that way. We have everything in the U.S. that you can find anywhere else on Earth, except for Amazon rainforest. We have rainforests in the U.S., but the tropical rainforest we don't have, and we don't have Arctic tundra until Alaska became a part of the States. California has the same thing, not that I'm a bigot about California, but you can travel 4 hours from where I grew up if you take out all the other people, because now it takes another hour just to get out of town. And you can be in every climate that Earth has, except for Arctic tundra and Amazonian rainforest. And so we moved out there, lived in a rental for 6 months while they were building our house, and we moved into our house, 4-bedroom on a 1/4 acre for $28,500. $28,900 is what we paid for it.
Wow.
In 1959. I started kindergarten and spent 1 semester in kindergarten at Capistrano, and then they built Nevada Avenue Elementary. There was a time in the 60s where 1,000 families a day were moving into San Fernando Valley. And so I remember jackrabbits and tumbleweeds and hunting for crystal rocks around, and that doesn't exist anymore. 25% of Los Angeles is pavement. That doesn't even count the houses and the lots, that's just pavement. But I did K through 12 in LA. What else? I was in Boy Scouts. I've been up Mount Whitney twice, the highest point in the 48 states. Coloradoans love it when I say that. So, oh, we got these 14ers in Colorado. Yeah, but not Whitney. It's 14,400 and 14,500 feet tall. It was 14,495 when I went up, and so either GPS or earthquakes have moved it up 5 more feet in the last 40, 50 years. And Bennett didn't know this until that long ago. You know, I've been up Mount Whitney a couple of times. Oh yeah, that's nice. It's forests and mountains, and it's very pretty and whatnot. And she didn't realize that about 12,500 feet you're above tree line. And so Mount Whitney is rocks. There's nothing there. It's a flat iron. It's a slip fault. It's an earthquake fault. So it goes up from the west up to the peak, and at the peak, it's kind of like the bottom of a flat iron that you sit there. So you walk up to the top of Whitney, and if you don't stop walking, you're back where you started that morning at 12.5. Of course, it's 1,200 feet down, a straight sheer cliff face.
We watched a YouTube video that showed Whitney. Oh, I thought it was a beautiful forested place. But
It is still 12,000 feet.
It looks
yeah.
desert-like.
Yeah. And 12.5 is Mirror Lake, and if you're stupid, you can go swim in Mirror Lake, because they're probably not there anymore, but there was a little glacier, just a little snowpack that persisted for 12 months on one end of the lake. And so the lake was 32 exact degrees, because there's ice in the lake. And so if the water's cold enough, I know this from experience, you don't feel the cold. You can feel the pressure on your feet and legs as you wander in, but it's not cold. It's just too cold to feel cold. And so we did that once is enough. I don't do that anymore.
But your body can feel the cold, I bet, and you don't want to be in there very long.
You do start to shiver and whatnot. Of course, when you're a dumb Boy Scout, it doesn't make any difference. What else? We had our Boy Scout troop. I wasn't an Eagle Scout because our Boy Scout troop went camping every single month. That was our agenda, and so I got all the merit badges you can get out and around. But I got almost none of them you can get, like citizenship and God and country, all the stuff that you get in town, because we were always out of town. So. And so I was not an Eagle Scout. There was one question, why did you decide to become a physician?
Yes.
I don't know. Dad was an electrical engineer. And I was retired until I found out that the family thought I was gonna become an engineer.
Is that right?
His sister told me that.
Is that right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had no idea.
Oops.
I do like, and you probably figured this out, I do like science and math and ecology and astronomy, and, I have a large interest, but I like healthcare too. I don't know why I picked medicine, but I don't know ever picking anything else. I do remember back when I was a kid, my next older sister is 2.5 years older than me, and my oldest sister is 5 years older than me.
So you're number 3.
I'm number 3 of 5.
A 5.
Donna Ray's a
Okay.
cousin.
Okay,
Yeah.
a 5.
So, I remember when I was a kid, my sister Cindy, who her career was a nurse, she lives down in Independence, down there now. She was a nurse for the longest time, then she was a clinical nurse specialist because she predates nurse practitioners. And she did geriatric psychiatry, and so she did rounds at some of the hospitals around the Independence, Kansas City area, Alzheimer's units and whatnot. But when we were kids, she was older than me. I remember she would have her friends over playing in the backyard because we had one of the few backyards in Canoga Park that was mainly grass. There was one tree, bunch of roses, and grass. And so they would wrap me up in toilet paper like a mummy, put me on the ladder to the bunk bed, because we had bunk beds because there were 5 kids, and they would carry me around the backyard like a wounded person. Maybe that's why I decided to become a physician. I don't
An
know.
orderly.
What?
You worked as an orderly.
Oh yeah, I was an orderly going through high school. Yeah, worked at Canoga Terrace Convalescent Hospital. I took care of Oliver Hardy's next door neighbor. Anybody remember Oliver Hardy? Laurel and Hardy. Yeah. I took care of Ann Margaret's father, Gus Olsen, Olssen. So Ann Margaret's name is actually Olsen, and so he was very Danish. And I remember, this is how mature I was as a kid growing up. I remember Ann would come in and visit him just a couple times. I always had evening shift or night shift, so I don't know how often she came to visit, but I saw her a couple times walking down the hallway to visit her dad. And I go, there's a black Corvette out front.
Never mind, Ann.
Never mind Ann.
Sounds right.
Thanks. Sounds about right. And I took care of Niels Bohr's lab assistant. He's the guy that invented the solar system model of the atom. And he and his mother were both in the nursing home at the time. And I don't think she was 2 feet tall. He was a fairly slight-boned, small man. And his mother didn't even come up to his armpit. And he would dress up suit, white shirt, no tie, every morning. Like he's going to the lab and whatnot, and she would be on his elbow, and they just walk around the nursing home all day long. And he had what's now is Alzheimer's, but back then he was just old and senile. And so me, being the good Christian and being very, very polite and whatnot, I jerk his chain a little bit. I'd ask him a math question, boom, get the answer. I'd ask him what planet this was, ask him calculus, boom, knew the answer. This guy had skills.
So take us to Graceland.
Oh, and then I graduated high school. I came to Graceland and met my lovely wife. I had a girlfriend in high school, Judy Johnson. Give me a minute.
I don't want to hear about her.
Don't want to hear about her. And same story as my father. Oh, I got to back up. When I was 13 years old, I brought a picture to my mother that I found in the house. I go, where did you find this picture of me? She goes, that's your dad. Yeah. So apparently I'm my father's evil twin brother. I'm the spitting image of my father, which I think is kind of a compliment. I don't have a problem with that. That's okay. But same problem Dad had. Lutherans are, I guess, the dating kind, but not the marrying kind. I know, how mature are we when we're kids? So I came to Graceland. I couldn't start dating Benna until after my brother broke up with her sister. I don't know the logic in that, but that's how it worked in my mind. And so Dave and Lulu were dating for a while. They broke up. I don't know the reasons. You have to ask him that one. And my roommate Elwin Aku from Honolulu, Hawaii, had been nagging me for a while. You gotta date that Benna girl. You gotta date Benna. You should ask her out.
She's a nice one.
Oh, yeah. And so finally, and she had, Benna doesn't like it when I say that, she had legs that went all the way to the ceiling. She was long-legged back then.
That can't be good.
Well, it was for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not
That
bad.
can't be good, well, it was for me. So I finally got up the courage to ask her out, and our first date, of course, I was in Fawn's house, and so I asked a bunch of guys, Fawn, I said, let's go to the movie, and they had movies in the MSC back then, in Newcomb Memorial Center. Jay Newcomb, Jay and Cherry went to church with us for a while out in California out there. So I finally asked her out. I think we had 5 sacks of popcorn, the grocery bags of popcorn that I popped in my couch. I had an electrified couch. I put a wall socket in the arm of the couch so you could plug in the popcorn. Lester's probably shaking in his boots
Yeah, no
right
kidding, I know,
now.
it's against the rules.
Burn the place down, yeah.
Whatever.
Aren't you glad you didn't learn about all this stuff?
I am.
So we brought 5 shop bags of popcorn, me and 7 Fonts guys, and we watched The Guns of Navarone.
It was more than 7, it was like 20.
It was a whole row.
Yeah.
And
Fox Man and you.
yes, yeah. She's on the end, I'm next to her, and Fonts Man to the other. I'm a real romance man. Yeah. And we ate popcorn and threw at each other. And if you've ever seen The Guns of Navarone, the only female actor in the movie gets shot and killed because she's a traitor. Now that's a chick flick to take. I'm surprised she ever went out with me twice. But we survived that encounter and fell in love, and we got married in 1976. We got married on the bicentennial. Down in Independence. We got married the first weekend of World Conference because I had family. I didn't have any family left in New Jersey, but Uncle Gus and Aunt Ava still lived in New Jersey. Gus and Ava Segallo, they were not related to us, but it was Uncle Gus and Aunt Ava, and so they wanted to come to the wedding. Benna had relatives from Michigan to Hawaii. I had relatives from coast to coast. And so the only time we get the family together was World Conference, so we got married the first Saturday of World Conference. We took off.
And had you graduated?
No, this was
That's
before,
what-
6
that's what
weeks
I wondered.
before
That's what I
graduation,
wondered.
yes.
For like 6 weeks
Yeah,
after that.
so we had a
The same
week.
class.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So we had a week down at Roaring River State Park, which is the quiet end of the Table Rock Lake down there, trout hatchery and whatnot. So we walked around and held hands and had a honeymoon. And I came back to Lamoni for 6 weeks, and she went back down to Independence for 6 weeks. So we were married for a week, and then we weren't married for a week. Joe Bagley was the best man at our wedding. He was my roommate. He's a
It was
saint.
longer than a week, it was like 6 weeks, wasn't it?
6 weeks, 6
Yeah,
weeks,
6
yeah,
weeks.
yeah, 6 weeks till graduation. He's a saint because he put up with me for 6 more weeks. So he lives down Pensacola area, he's a pharmacist. I'm the only one of our 5 kids that made it through Graceland and came out in the black. Everybody else goes through college, they come out in massive debt. I had a National Merit Scholarship that paid my way through Graceland. A half of 1% of graduating seniors in high school can get a National Merit Scholarship, and I got it. RCA paid my way through undergraduate school.
His brother was so happy when you,
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Oh, Mom was happy, yeah. And so I helped Dave with my tuition money because when you're a kid in our family, we're family. And so, I think what, $500 or $600 went into Dave's tuition one year from my bank account, and that didn't strike me as unusual at all. The family is going to school, and the family helps the family go through school. And so I made it through Graceland. I applied to medical school. I think there were 6 of us that graduated with pre-med type degrees at Graceland that year. 5 of the 6 of us went to medical school, and the 6th one went to pharmacy school. And so Graceland has a pretty good record of getting people to where they need to go for ongoing education, graduate and whatnot. However, when you're a kid from California going to school in Iowa, I applied to some schools out in California. I don't think I applied to Iowa or Mizzou. I don't think I did. It was just California schools because I'm a California resident.
Well, so you're correcting some of my history
What?
that I gave when I.
Oh, what did I do? Maybe you're right. What did I do?
No, I hadn't thought you'd applied.
Oh, no, I applied when I was a
Oh.
senior and didn't even get an interview. Because when you're from California, when you're a California school, of course they have UCLA, UCS, UC San Francisco, UC Irvine, all these places, they have thousands of applicants. Why would they even give the time of day to some kid from Iowa who wants to come home? Because anybody that goes to California to go to medical school is going to stay in California, so that will take California residents. So I didn't get time of day the first year I applied. So we went down to Independence. I was on the management track. I worked nights at 7-Eleven on 23rd Street. And before I quit, how long did I work there? A couple of months?
Probably.
Yeah. They said, hey, you want to become a manager or trainee or whatever? And I remember there was one young lady, girl, she came in, this is like 3, 4 in the morning, she came in with a purse and she just shaking. I go, oh man, I'm gonna die. You know, she's doing something. She reaches into her purse and she comes out with, I mean, and she's not, I mean, it's not Parkinson's, it's she was nervous, she was strung out, she was something. She reaches in the purse, she pulls out a $5 bill, says, I really need a pack of cigarettes. Thank you.
No problem.
Here's your pack of cigarettes on there. So I decided that being a 7-Eleven manager wasn't in my future, so I quit. And I went to work for Brunson Instrument down on the corner of 23rd and 435. It is still there. And I was a draftsman for Brunson Instrument, which means I copied old drafting drawings that were starting to fall apart. Brunson was my great uncle. He got a 3rd grade education. He's the richest relative that I have. So, but he had a mechanical mind. He had the first manufacturing plant underground in Kansas City. I go into work, 62 feet underground, and you never know what the weather was when you came out. You come out, there's snow on the ground. Well, where'd that come from? You know, because you are quite isolated 62 feet underground. He built his manufacturing plant underground. They made optical tooling instruments.
Is this in the limestone caves?
Yeah, corner at 23rd and 435. It's still there, a little Brunson Instrument there. He was the first one to do that. He blasted out the cave underground because his optical tooling instruments, he had a plant downtown Kansas City, they'd knock him out of tolerance with just the trucks driving by. So he could only work at night. So he said, oh, make me a cave. And he takes credit for winning World War II, not that our family has any ego problems or anything. Because until he made his theodolites, and I'm not 100% sure what I'm talking about, but the total indicated run out of the bearings he used on his optical tooling instruments was 25 millionths of an inch. What that meant was you could take a point, you know, like a surveyor's transit, you could shoot it over there, take it down, spin it around over there, set it back up again, and he would be within 7/1000ths of an inch of where he started originally,
Wow.
100 yards away. And so until he got that degree of accuracy off of his instruments, all the big machines that we made up until then, you can have all the drawings you want and need, but nothing ever fit exactly. And so by the time you got from one end of the battleship to the other end of the battleship, you had to custom make every piece to finish putting it together. When he got his instruments figured out, you could just, and we did outproduce the Japanese and the Germans, and that's how we won the war. So he takes credit for winning the
They
war.
make, they make optical stuff for torpedoes.
Yeah.
Increase the accuracy of torpedoes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is they predate lasers and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, the reticle, the eyepiece thing with the crosshairs on the inside, he used Black Widow silk for that because it's very strong and it doesn't sag and it holds well. So he had a little Black Widow spider collection in his office. Things you learn. So I worked there for a better part of a year. Brunson asked if I wanted to take over that plant, but I had already applied for medical school the second time. My second year of applications for medical school, now I was a Missouri resident, and so I applied to 3 schools, just 3 schools. I knew I wanted family practice. Don't know why I wanted family practice, but I wanted family practice. And I applied to Kansas City Osteopathic, Des Moines Osteopathic, because that's where Bennett comes from, and Kirksville, which is over in Kirksville over there. And there, that year, I got 3 interviews and I got 3 acceptances. I was accepted at all 3 medical schools. And so it helps if you're a hometown resident. I picked Kansas City, and same thing, this is how mature I am. I picked Kansas City because Des Moines was a converted Catholic school, and the fountains were still kid-sized. They were too low. And I didn't want to bend over with my rear end
Because we already
poking out.
lived in Kansas City.
No, that was a minor factor, but the fountains were too low. I didn't pick Kirksville because we had a house in Independence, Missouri, so I went to Kansas City Osteopathic. At that time, there were 4 schools in the nation that required a course in nutrition to graduate. It was required. You had to have nutrition to graduate out of this school. And the other 3 were, I forget, Harvard or Yale, one of those 2, Wash U in St. Louis, and I think it was UC San Francisco, and the one I went to. And so that was a deciding factor for me also. I was interested in preventive medicine. After that, I did 2 years of a public health scholarship to pay for that. Benna worked. She got her PhD, putting hubby through. But she worked as a nurse. How long after you graduated were you head nurse at dialysis at VA? Not that long.
Oh, yeah, I got pregnant at the end, so
So she quit being head nurse at dialysis.
I
so,
didn't, yeah,
Yeah.
after he was born.
Yeah, we had 1 child per state. We had one. Our eldest was born in Missouri. The second one, after graduation, I owed 2 years of a public health scholarship. It's not really a scholarship. They pay you a stipend and tuition for however long you're on. And you owe them that amount of time afterwards. So I owed 2 years of public health. I could have gone Coast Guard. I could have gone Uniformed Service Corps. I could have gone Indian Health Services, and I could have gone physician shortage. And so I went physician shortage, and dumb luck, but lucky me, I was recruited out to Escondido, California, North San Diego County by Tom Rassel, a fellow physician. That wasn't working out as advertised. No fault of his, no fault of mine. It just wasn't what we were looking for. And so then I found.
How long were you there?
Oh, I was out in Escondido for 5 years. And that's when Danny was born, like I say, 1 child per state. So I worked up in Ramona for my 2-year obligation. I worked 3 years up there, and it's 15, 20 miles up the hill from Escondido, which is another 20, 25 miles in from the ocean. So I was up in the hills. I was between San Diego County and the desert. And that was enjoyable. I liked that. Taking care of migrant farm workers. Of course, they're illegal aliens now, but migrant farm workers. And burnout Vietnam vets because they would stay close enough to San Diego for VA, but they couldn't live in civilization. So we took care of a lot of those, and and Ramona itself was an equestrian center, and so it was just the people that lived there. So that was kind of fun. That was kind of interesting. I supervised a clinic out in Borrego Springs and Santa Isabel. If you go up into the hills and over the hills and down into the desert, I supervised those two clinics, and they had PAs and nurse practitioners out there. San Isabel Clinic was world-renowned because they had the bread store there, San Isabel bread, and so you could buy your bread up there, and it was really good stuff. Borrego Springs, they'd run the clinic from like 7 to 11 in the morning, and then they would close down until about 6 p.m. and then run from 6 to 9 in the evening. Because in the heat of the day in the middle of the desert in San Bernardino, the asphalt would start to melt on the roads. And so you couldn't go to the clinic without tracking asphalt into the clinic during the heat of the day. And so, not like Iowa, but it gets hot in Iowa. But I lived out there for 5 years, called John Edwards, 2 doors down right over here, at the end of that, well, toward the end of that, and I said, do you know of anybody in the Midwest that might be looking for a doctor? And he said, yeah. You want to give me a hint? Well, come on out. Homecoming is this weekend or next weekend. Come on out and we'll discuss this. And so we flew out at the last minute, had dinner at John and Dottie's house. We stayed at the Chief Lamoni. I think we lost. Didn't the toilet back up that weekend or something? I mean, there was no room in the inn, and so they put us in a room, and something was wrong with the room, but we made it work. So. But we stayed at Chief Lamoni, had dinner with John and Dottie, and went around campus and whatnot because it's homecoming. And in that dinner, he said, "Yeah, Lamoni could use a doctor. You want to come back to Lamoni?" I went, "Yes!" And that's how we came to Lamoni. It's all John Edwards' fault.
And how come you were attracted to Lamoni? You said yes.
I don't, why were we attracted to Lamoni? Church, Graceland, family.
I remember
Experiences
you
here.
were saying it was green.
Oh, yes, it is green in Iowa. And California does not have this color of green where I grew up and where I lived. No.
Actually, your interview was scheduled for that weekend we were there, so it wasn't like he told you that well.
Oh, yeah, he did take me around the hospital and Dr. McMillan and Dr. Sullivan. I don't know, did we meet homecoming weekend? I don't remember.
What year was that?
What, 87?
87.
87, yeah,
Probably.
yeah. It was memorable for both of us, wasn't it?
Yeah, boy, quite the impact.
Oh, great, another man coming to town. Jim?
Just a fun fact, we had just left from Chicago, and Alan Smith, not the Alan Smith here, moved to California in the same neck of the woods where you were. They were talking to us about moving out there. Tom Rassel had already talked to Pat, trying to get us. And
Switch
I was
out.
in favor of San Diego. Pat wanted to come to Lamoni.
Thank you, Paul.
San Diego
and
did
then you came. We
So
said,
we
wow,
were
what a
gonna switch
coincidence.
jobs is what it was, yeah.
I don't know if it was switching jobs. I think
I don't know.
Tom
That would
Rassel
have been
was
earlier.
putting together a group.
Could be. After I left, he joined the Escondido family practice, and so his attempt for a dynasty didn't come to fruition. So some of that I assume was my fault. So
And Mark,
Yes.
your father he was state president?
yeah, Dad was state president. Dad. This is part of the family tree. We're not going to have church today, are we? I'll just keep talking.
It's like you have
Okay.
12 minutes or something.
Yeah. No, when I left to go to Graceland, the RCA plant Van Nuys, well, when the aerospace crash happened, we landed on the moon, aerospace crashed. My residential block in Canoga Park lost half of the jobs on that single block.
Wow.
Just devastated West San Fernando Valley. Now, where I grew up, I was a couple of miles from Rocketdyne. Rocketdyne tested every rocket engine from Alan Shepard through the Apollo program. So I remember as a kid growing up, they'd light these engines off 2 miles away from my house, and you'd see the plume come off that way because they'd stick the nose of the rocket engine into the mountain so it wouldn't take off. So I remember that as a kid growing up. And we didn't know this, but 3 or 4 months before we moved out in 1959, the Santa Susana Field plant, you can Google it, had the first nuclear reactor that generated commercial amounts of electricity. They actually sent electricity over to that little town right over there that had a fish hatchery that we would go spend Sunday afternoons at every once in a while. And it melted down spring of 1959. And this is how much we knew about nuclear energy back then. It was in a galvanized metal shed, blew the top off, melted 30 some odd of the 60 reactor rods into a puddle. They didn't have a China syndrome, but almost. And between the radioactive potassium and strontium and iodine that was released into the atmosphere, they estimate about 1,500 excess cancer deaths in my neighborhood. That reactor didn't exist until 1999, but it melted down in 1959. That's how much we had to beat those Ruskies. So, and it's the worst nuclear accident until Chernobyl. Chernobyl beat them. 3 Mile Island, nothing. But you can Google it if you want to. It's interesting. Glenn Johnson. Not Glenn Johnson, state president. Glenn and Mary Johnson was the chief engineer, maintenance and engineer there. He had to help clean up that mess. And so Mary Johnson, living over here with Rick, right down on Main Street, will tell you the story of how Glenn came home. His clothes were completely soaked, and she had to put him in the laundry and sent him right back to work with radioactive clothing. And so she's part of a Superfund surveillance study ongoing until the rest of them die off. And Glenn died from esophageal cancer. Never smoked, never drank, a good high priest on the state high council in LA. But he died from esophageal cancer, so he probably is fallout from that. Dad, when I came to Graceland, RCA hired him back to New Jersey because his division in Van Nuys went from 490 engineers down to 7. He was one of 7 remaining engineers there. And so RCA sold the plant to, I think, Cessna. It's either Cessna or Learjet. And when they bought the plant, they said, we're interested in buying the plant. It was right across the street from Busch Gardens in LA. We'll buy the plant if we can have Hap Easter. His name was Hap. Happy Easter. He wasn't Hap in our family because I have an Uncle Hap. But he was Hap Easter. So we'll buy the plant if we can have Hap. So they sold my father with the plant. 3 years later, they called him back. I was at Graceland through all of this. They called him back and said, would you consider going back to work back in New Jersey? He said, well, what about that retirement? He said, done. Well, what about moving? Done. And so they moved back to New Jersey. And so my story is I go somewhere, Mom and Dad move. I found them in New Jersey. Then they moved to Indianapolis. Found them in Indianapolis. Then he was going to be state president in Central Missouri State. That's when they voted to leave the church because Mom was an elder, and that didn't fly real good in Central Missouri State. And so that's how my father came to Lamoni. Dad was the second self-supporting state president in the history of the church. First one was Nauvoo back in the 1860s. Dad was the second one in LA stake after Jim Kemp died on the golf course. So don't go golfing if you work for the church. But he came to Lamoni. I think he just finally gave up. Okay, we'll just move into Lamoni because Mark keeps finding us. But I came to Lamoni. I've been here ever since.
Okay, wait.
Yes.
Okay.
More questions?
Our time is quickly dwindling.
Yes.
I want to hear about your faith journey.
Well, that's another hour and a half.
Oh, sorry. You can do it in 10 minutes.
Just like medicine, I don't know. I do remember, I do have intimate knowledge of a couple of very faithful experiences. You were talking about
Oh, in
One
the
of-
Sequoia Forest.
Yeah, one of which we were driving out to
Yeah.
LA for my brother's wedding. Little Opel Manta wagon, and Bennett had never been out west, so we went through Sequoia, didn't have time to get to Yosemite.
Northwest, I lived northwest.
Yeah, well, you have been to California by then, so.
Because I went to your house for Christmas before we were married.
Well, that wasn't Sequoia. So we go to Sequoia National Forest. If you've ever been there, I recommend it. If you haven't been there, I still recommend it. They have huge, enormous trees. Showed the General Sherman tree, went to the Chief Sequoia tree. Between those two trees, which are their own stopping points, there's the Grove of the Congress, which is a little draw. And there's a little sign at the bottom. Sorry. And it says in that little sign, the most dense concentration of living matter of any place on earth.
That makes me cry.
Because the small trees only went from here to the wall. Those are the small ones. The big ones were big. And so I got out of the car, stood off of the road, looked up at the Grove of the Congress, and all you see is trunks because they're so huge. And I was struck with the knowledge that trees and living things have souls. Don't ask me what a soul is, I don't know. But that I was struck with that. Had a religious experience, tired, probably dirty, I don't know, in a car, driving from Independence, Missouri, out to my brother's wedding in California. That's one of my formative religious experiences. The other one that I can bring to the top of my head was Camp Buckhorn. I'm not prejudiced for Camp Buckhorn or anything like that. The Southern California Church's reunion grounds. You guys ever who's been to Buckhorn? Well, you need to go. It's 5,000 feet up in the San Bernardino National Forest, and there you can lay down in the middle of the night and touch the stars because you're above the smog. You're a mile high, and it's just stunningly beautiful. So I was an early morning sunrise worship service with the Zions League. I have no memory of that service, but I was sitting there contemplating, and I was struck. I knew that my job in this world was going to be something with making the place, whatever the place is, this is the place right now, suitable for people to be able to relax and worship, and making and trying to educate or make people better persons. That translated into health and medicine. So those are two of my formative experiences. One of your questions was, why are you still in the church? Yeah, what keeps me here? So the short answer is, I got no place better. My theology has changed over the years. I think all of our theology has changed over the years. As I learn more and more and more, God becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. I don't depend on my Creator to raise the sun every morning. We used to. I don't anymore. I don't depend on my Creator to save my mother's breast cancer. It just happened. I don't depend on my Creator to cause my mother's breast cancer.
You know what, you probably don't have time to explain all of this.
I know, I'm not going to go into my personal theology.
No, I'm liking this. I'm enjoying this.
But as I learn more and more and more, God gets smaller and smaller and smaller. That puts more responsibility on me to make the world a better place. Puts more responsibility on us to make the world a better place. We are the hands of Jesus. I'm not going to depend on Jesus to come down and go, poof, you're a better person. I have to do the work myself to do that. So that's kind of where my current theology is. And you are a part of that journey with me. And so I appreciate you. Even when I'm in Sunday school and saying, well, that's not right. Why doesn't everybody think like me? Because that's where I come from. That's where I am. I'm interested in answers. I'm interested in becoming a better person. Now, I need to be on a better diet. I need to exercise more. Maybe you should remind me of that, because me reminding me of it hasn't worked that much so far. So, but I can't find a better place for me to be me and do me. Yeah, I miss mountains. Yeah, I miss ocean. And I miss some of the people. But I will miss being here more. And so I think I'm stuck here. And besides, we have one child per state. We had one in Missouri, one in California, one in Iowa. I am afraid to move out of Iowa.
Am I the only person in this room that is amazed and enlightened to how emotional I have sat with you for all these years and been intimidated by your knowledge, your intellect, your confidence, and yet this morning when you started to talk about your Uncle John, when you started to talk about your father, I am amazed at the level of, what's the word, love, and you're weeping. I never knew you to be this emotional. Am I the only one that today is thinking, wow, I didn't know this about this man?
That's why I stay sarcastic. It hides the tears.
I've seen it back when we first came here, and he was teaching youth classes at Reunion, and I got to be I think I got to be a helper, and he bore his testimony with the kids, and they were emotional, and that impressed me. I mean, that was way back in the 80s, but
Yeah, we were younger back then. So. Well, and all the work I've done trying to advocate for children and children's safety issues, I don't know how many times I've testified in court on child maltreatment cases. There was a time when the psychologists that worked for FOCUS, the Family-Oriented Children's Unit and Services, we had an adolescent and pre-adolescent behavioral psych unit at the hospital for a number of years. I was medical director there for a while, for most of it. And I got trained in forensic examination of potentially abused children. I think I was the 4th person in Iowa to get that kind of training. And so we would go around the state on subpoena and testify in court for these abused children and whatnot. By the time it got to court, most all of them were abused. The ones that weren't never went to court. That's how the court works. But Don and I would drive around, down to Princeton, down to Trenton, down to, I think, Onestone, all the way down to Columbia, Missouri, and of course Des Moines and Knoxville and whatnot. One time they flew me out to Denver, Colorado for a case, but it was a cloudy day, so I didn't get to see the mountains when I was in Denver. So they flew me out, testified, flew me back. Thank you very much. So, but in the context of advocating for children, as part of my AGEAS, the banner that I run under, safety and health for kids and whatnot, but that didn't help my ability to control my emotions. So.
25 years ago, I was going through my dad's library and I pulled off what I thought was my dad's blue jacket manual from the Navy. And I opened the front cover, expecting to see my dad's signature. Instead it said, Finus Easter. And I looked at that and I said, who is Finus Easter? What kind of name is Finus? And why does my dad have his book? So I went upstairs and I said, I found this book. Why do you have it? And he said, well, Finus is a friend of mine, and I needed the book, and he gave it to me when I needed to have this book in the Navy. So for some reason, that name stuck in my head. 25 years later, I come to Lamona, Iowa, and I see the last name Easter, and I said, I got to meet this guy.
Well, we're out of time, but Dad got his name because he's the 10th of 12 children, and he has,
You're supposed to be the
he's one of 7. And I have Uncle John, Uncle Clarence, Uncle Charles, Uncle Eldo. I'm missing one of them. And so when he was born in the house on Scott on the bed, and the doctor made it to the delivery. And so Grandma Easter delivers Dad, and he goes, "Oh, it's a boy." And Grandma goes, "Oh, no." "What do you mean, oh, no? It's a boy." I said, "I don't have any names. I'm out of names." And so the doctor, and this is Grandma Easter telling me, the doctor said, "Name him Finus. It's French for the end." Because all the movies have finite on the end of the movie. So that's how my father got his name. And then she had Helen and Ellen after that. So I got my name Mark because they didn't want Matthew, Luke, or John.
Thank you. We are so lucky to